Let's be honest. There's nothing more frustrating than watching your phony not ring. You know there was a connection. You laughed. You vibed. Maybe you even got vulnerable. And now silence. So you start overthinking. Did I say too much? Was I too available? Should I send a casual or up? Spoiler alert, no. Here's the truth most people won't tell you. It's not about chasing, fixing, or faking it. It's about doing one simple shift that completely flips the dynamic. Because when you understand what really sparks desire, not just attention, but genuine interest, you stop chasing texts and start attracting them. Let's talk about the moment everything changes. The moment he becomes the one checking his phony after you do this. When you like someone, it's natural to want to keep the conversation going. You find yourself thinking of little excuses to text, asking how their day was, replying the second they respond, because in your mind you're showing interest, effort, and care. But what you might not realize is that this kind of constant availability, this habit of always keeping the momentum alive, is doing the exact opposite of what you hope for. It doesn't build attraction. It removes mystery. And without mystery, there's no space for desire to grow. One of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to fill the silence. Silence feels uncomfortable, especially when you're emotionally invested. You wonder what it means. You assume the worst, so you overcompensate. You reach out again, you double text, you try to re-spark a connection that you fear is slipping. But here's the truth, and someone can't miss you if you never go away. And no one feels the need to reach out when they're already getting your energy on a silver platter without having to earn it. Think about it. When you're always available, always initiating, you're training the other person to believe they don't need to invest. They don't need to reach out because you're already carrying the whole emotional weight of the communication. You're doing the work for them. There's no space for their curiosity to build because you're constantly answering questions they haven't even had the chance to ask. You're showing up before they've had time to wonder where you are. But when you create space, intentional, confident space, you disrupt the dynamic. Suddenly, they're not sure where you went. They're not sure what you're thinking. They start checking their phone, wondering why the notification hasn't popped up. That slight pause you created by stepping back becomes a mirror. It gives them a moment to reflect. Do I miss talking to her? Did I take her presence for granted? That's when the shift happens. That's when the text comes in. And let's be clear, this isn't about playing games. It's not about manipulating someone or creating artificial distance just to get a reaction. It's about reclaiming your energy and learning to recognize your value. It's about no longer giving someone 24/7 access to your attention when they haven't done anything to earn that kind of emotional real estate. You're not punishing them by creating silence. You're honoring yourself by stepping back and letting the dynamic breathe. When you stop filling the silence, you begin to attract someone's genuine interest instead of their passive attention. And if they don't reach out when you pause, that tells you something important too. It means the connection may have only existed because you were keeping it alive on your own. And that clarity, while painful, is freeing. It allows you to stop pouring into something that was never mutual and redirect that energy toward people who meet you halfway. Creating space isn't weakness, it's power. It shows confidence. It signals that you have a full life, a rich inner world, and enough self-respect to not chase someone who isn't showing up for you. That kind of presence is magnetic. It draws people in, not because you're trying harder, but because you're trying less and being more. And in the end, when you stop filling the silence, that's often when your phone lights up. Not because you pushed or chased, but because you finally gave them something real to reach for. A lot of people talk about standards, but few actually live by them. It's easy to say, I want someone who puts in effort, or I deserve consistent communication. But those words mean very little if your actions contradict them. The moment you say one thing and accept another, you send a clear message, not to them, but to yourself, that your boundaries are flexible and your standards are negotiable. And here's the truth: the moment someone feels that, they stop trying, not because they don't care, but because they don't have to. When you raise your standard and actually live by it, everything changes. You're no longer seeking validation from someone's attention. You're measuring their energy against your values. You're not asking, will he text me? You're thinking, does this behavior align with the kind of relationship I want? That shift in mindset is subtle but powerful. It turns the focus away from chasing and back toward choosing. You stop trying to win someone over, and you start evaluating whether they're actually showing up for the role you've made space for in your life. Here's where ego and insecurity can trip you up. You raise your standard, but when someone doesn't meet it, you feel rejected. You wonder if your standards are too high or if you're being difficult. So you bend a little, you make exceptions, you rationalize. But the problem is, every time you do that, your energy shifts. You move from self-assured to self-abandoning. And the other person feels that. They might not consciously know what changed, but they sense that the balance of power has shifted. That they don't need to do as much because you'll accept less. People rise or fall to the level of what you tolerate. If you accept lazy effort, delayed replies, half-hearted conversations, that's exactly what you'll keep getting. Not because you don't deserve more, but because you're signaling that this is enough. But when you hold the line, when you say, this is the level of energy and respect I give, and it's also what I expect in return, you create a standard that either inspires someone to meet you or filters them out. And the best part, the moment you start living your standard, you stop waiting around for someone to text you. Because your attention is no longer for sale. You're not hoping for breadcrumbs. You're looking for consistency, clarity, and connection. You're not desperate for a message. You're aligned with your missioning to be with someone who actually shows up. That energy is magnetic. It's felt. And often, it's exactly what prompts the person who was half invested to suddenly snap to attention. That, hey, I was just thinking about you, message. It often comes after you stop bending, after you go quiet, not out of spite, but because you're no longer willing to be an emotional convenience. That text doesn't arrive when you're proving your worth. It arrives when you're finally owning it. And if it doesn't come, that's still a win, because your standard just did the work of filtering someone out who wasn't truly ready or able to meet you where you are. Living your standard isn't about playing hard to get. It's about being real enough to say, I'm not available for confusion, inconsistency, or emotional laziness. And when you really live in that energy, not just speak it, you don't need to chase texts. The right people reach out, the wrong ones fall away, and you're left with something far better than momentary attention on self-respect, clarity, and a space wide open for someone who actually gets it. People fall into patterns, and relationships, even before they're official, are full of them. The late-night texts, the hey stranger messages after 3 days of silence, the flirty back and forth that never actually leads to plans. It's all a pattern. And once a guy learns your rhythm, how you respond, how quickly you reply, how much effort he actually needs to put in to get your attention, he settles into that cycle. Not because he's calculated or cruel, but because he's human. We all do it. We figure out what works and we stick to it. That's where comfort comes in. And comfort, for all its appeal, is the enemy of curiosity. The danger of these patterns is that they lull both people into a kind of emotional autopilot. He knows you'll respond quickly, so he doesn't feel urgency. He knows you'll forgive inconsistency, so he doesn't value consistency. He knows you'll keep the energy going, so he doesn't have to add any of his own. And before long, you're not even connecting. You're just playing out a script that neither of you is excited about. That's when people start to drift, not because they don't like each other, but because nothing new is happening. There's no spark, no interruption, no moment that makes one of you stop and actually feel something. That's why disrupting the pattern matters. It doesn't have to be dramatic. You don't need to ghost, play games, or deliver some long emotional monologue about how you're over it. All it takes is a shift, a pause, a conscious choice to stop giving automatic responses. Maybe you don't reply within minutes. Maybe you don't initiate like you usually do. Maybe you break the pattern by not laughing at the same recycled jokes or not pretending you're okay with another vague "let's hang soon." You stop being predictable, and that unpredictability, it's powerful because what it does is wake the other person up. Suddenly, the dynamic feels different. The things they took for granted, the quick replies, the constant attention, the emotional availability, aren't just there anymore. And now they have to think, did something change? Did they do something? Are you pulling away? And more importantly, do they care enough to step forward and find out? That's when action speaks louder than any words ever could. If someone is truly interested, that disruption becomes the trigger for change. It stirs something. They lean in, they make an effort, they ask what's going on. They finally step up because they realize they might lose something they were enjoying without appreciating. But if they don't step forward, if they disappear into the silence or stay comfortably aloof, that tells you everything you need to know. The pattern wasn't mutual effort. It was you carrying the connection while they coasted. Interrupting the pattern is how you reclaim your power, not by trying to be cold or distant, but by no longer feeding energy into something that's only one-sided. You show them, and yourself, that you're not available for a dynamic that doesn't grow, deepen, or move forward. And that energy, that quiet confidence, that's often the very thing that makes someone reach out again, not because you demanded it, but because the pattern they were leaning on no longer exists. And without it, they're forced to actually feel the gap you left behind. Attraction isn't just built on closeness, it's built on contrast, on presence and absence, on moments of unpredictability that shake someone out of their emotional sleep. When you break the pattern, you create space. And in that space, one of two things happens: he either texts or he fades. Either way, you get clarity, and that's worth more than any recycled attention could ever be. Nothing makes someone look at you differently like realizing your world doesn't stop for them. It's not even about making them jealous. It's about shifting your energy back to where it belongs, your own life. When you start building momentum, chasing your passions, showing up for yourself, and actually enjoying your days without being glued to your phone waiting for a text, something in the dynamic changes. You become less predictable, less available, and without even trying, you become more attractive. People are drawn to purpose. When someone sees you moving forward, doing your thing, growing, laughing, showing up confidently in your own lane, they feel it. There's a silent magnetism in someone who's not waiting around for anything to happen, but is making things happen for themselves. You stop giving off the energy of, "I hope you notice me," and start giving off the energy of, "I've got things to do. And I'd love it if you came along, but I'm going either way." That shift speaks volumes without you having to say a single word. The reason this works isn't because it's a trick or a tactic. It's because it breaks the emotional dependency so many people unconsciously create. When you're waiting for someone to reach out, your world shrinks. You plan your responses, check your phone too often, feel your mood rising and falling based on their level of interest. But when you flip that and start focusing on your own life, your friends, your fitness, your goals, your growth, you take your power back. Suddenly, your day isn't built around their attention. It's built around your expansion. And that's the kind of energy people notice. It's not even always conscious. He might not be able to pinpoint what's different, but he'll feel it. The tone of your messages shifts. You're less reactive. You're more present. There's a certain glow to someone who's invested in their own life. That glow is what pulls people in, not the performance, not the pretending, but the real sense that you're living a life with or without them. This doesn't mean you stop caring or become emotionally cold. It means you care more about alignment than attachment. You care more about chemistry and consistency than crumbs of attention. You're not trying to be hard to get. You're just genuinely harder to distract because your mind is full of purpose. And when you show someone that you're not waiting around, that you've got things to do and people to see, it gives them a reason to step up or step out. Either way, you're good. There's a subtle but powerful truth here: people often value what feels valuable. When your energy is scattered, when you're chasing, overgiving, or constantly available, it doesn't feel rare. It feels assumed. But when you're centered, when you're rooted in your own path, you stop being someone who needs a text and become someone who inspires one. The moment he realizes you're not sitting around hoping he'll remember you, he starts to wonder why. And that wonder creates a pull, not because you manipulated anything, but because you simply remembered who you are. You stopped making someone else's potential your priority and returned to your own. And ironically, that's often the moment your phone lights up. Because when someone sees that you're building something real, with or without them, it triggers their curiosity, their attraction, and sometimes even their respect. You become less of a convenience and more of a catch. Not because you disappeared, but because you finally showed up for yourself. It's easy to think that when someone finally texts you, after days of silence, mixed signals, or minimal effort, you need to make a point. Maybe you want to be cold, short, or play it cool, just enough to punish them a little for making you wait. And sure, part of you feels justified. After all, where were they when you needed that message? But here's the thing: when you finally hear from them and you respond with expectation, resentment, or a subtle test, you're not showing confidence. You're showing that your peace depends on their behavior. And that's never attractive. The most magnetic thing you do in that moment is respond with warmth, but not with attachment, not with a hidden agenda, not with the hope that this message will now lead to a full-blown effort shift from their side. Just presence, just ease. Because what you're doing in that moment is demonstrating that you weren't waiting. You were living, that you can receive the message without it needing to fix anything, without it having to carry emotional baggage. Warmth, when it's grounded in confidence, is rare. It tells the other person, I'm good with or without you, but I'm still open. That kind of energy is like a breath of fresh air. People are so used to power games, cold shoulders, and emotional punishments. When they encounter someone who doesn't need to punish them for not texting, but also doesn't overextend themselves to overcompensate, it's disarming. It creates curiosity. It creates space for real connection instead of power dynamics. Now, this doesn't mean you ignore your needs. It doesn't mean you pretend everything is okay when it's not. But there's a difference between emotionally honest and emotionally reactive. Being warm doesn't mean you say, everything's perfect. It means you respond in a way that says, I'm not here to prove a point. I'm just here showing up as I am. If you want to meet me, great. If not, I'll keep moving. When someone reaches out and you meet that moment with calm, confident warmth, it throws off the rhythm they've come to expect, especially if they've been used to you reacting emotionally or chasing validation. Now, instead of feeling like they're in control, they're met with something grounded, something self-assured, and that's when they start to lean in. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you're not playing at all. People crave safety, whether they know it or not. Emotional safety. And nothing feels safer than someone who is calm, consistent, and unbothered by external drama. When your energy doesn't spike the second they give you attention, they realize you're not depending on it to feel okay. That independence doesn't push people away. It draws the right ones closer. It tells them that if they want to stay in your life, they're going to have to show up, not because you ask them to, but because they want to. That's the key: warmth without expectation. It's rare, it's powerful, and it's the difference between someone texting once and someone texting again and again and again. Because while ego wants to punish, confidence wants peace. And the moment you can hold your space with grace, even when you've been let down or kept waiting, is the moment you stop being someone they can treat casually and start becoming someone they deeply respect. Warmth, when it's rooted in strength, isn't weakness. It's what keeps the door open just enough for someone to realize they either need to walk through it properly or lose access to it for good. There's something almost mystical about the moment you stop needing the text. Not when you pretend you don't care, not when you force yourself to stay busy, but when it actually clicks. I'm okay without it. That's when everything changes, because the version of you who used to sit with your phone in your hand, overanalyzing every word, waiting for that little typing bubble to appear, no longer has control. And the energy you used to pour into the fantasy of what might be starts flowing back into the reality of who you are becoming. When you no longer need the text, you detach from the outcome, not in a cold, detached, cynical way, but with acceptance. You accept that someone choosing to reach out or not reach out doesn't say anything about your worth. It doesn't determine your day. It doesn't affect your self-respect. That kind of emotional shift is powerful, because now your focus isn't scattered. It's not outward. It's back where it belongs. On your peace, your growth, your life. You start to see the whole situation differently. Instead of wondering what you did wrong, you start asking what you actually want. Instead of chasing answers, you find clarity in your own values. What does effort look like to you? What does consistency feel like? How do you want to be loved, supported, and pursued? These are the questions that matter. Not, why hasn't he texted me? Because honestly, if he's meant to be part of your story, he won't need a searchlight to find you. He'll come with presence, not excuses. But here's the irony that so many people experience and don't always understand. When you let go of the need, that's when the text comes. It's almost as if your emotional grip loosens and the energy shifts. Suddenly, you're not sending out signals of lack, of please validate me, or of I'm here, waiting. You're just living, laughing, growing, moving, and that kind of energy is magnetic. Not because you're trying to attract, but because you're finally aligned. People feel the difference between someone who's reaching out from a place of emptiness and someone who's simply open. And when you reach that place where your day is full, your heart is steady, and your happiness doesn't hinge on anyone's attention, you radiate a kind of peace most people are starving for. That's when he texts. Not because you manipulated the situation, but because you became rare. There's nothing more rare than a person who doesn't need anything from you, but is still open to connection. That's not cold. That's clarity. It's the kind of inner balance that says, I like you, but I don't need you to like me back to feel whole. And when someone senses that, they lean in, because there's no pressure, no desperation, just space. And space is what lets attraction breathe. You can't fake this. You can't pretend to not care while secretly obsessing. You can't try to act chill while your self-worth is still wrapped up in whether or not they respond. That's emotional theater. What you can do is start pouring your energy into your own garden. Start healing. Start reconnecting with the parts of you that got lost in waiting. That's when the shift happens. Not on the outside, but on the inside. And from that place, if he texts, great. If he doesn't, that's information too. Either way, you're no longer in a holding pattern. You're not auditioning. You're not hoping for scraps. You're standing, grounded, confident. And that version of you, she's not waiting for anything. She's choosing. Which means when the right person texts, it won't feel like a lifeline. It'll just be a natural response to the beautiful energy you're already living in. The truth is, you were never meant to sit by your phone, hoping someone finally realizes your value. You were meant to be out living, building a life that excites you, protecting your peace, and surrounding yourself with people who show up without needing to be chased. Because the moment you stop reaching from a place of fear and start leading from a place of self-respect, everything shifts. He doesn't text because you begged for attention. He texts because he feels the difference. The difference in your energy. The difference in your boundaries. The difference in the way you show up. For yourself, you're not here to prove you're worthy. You already are. And the moment you start acting like it, not pretending, but believing, you stop attracting confusion and start inviting clarity. You stop tolerating bare minimums and start holding space for real, grown, mutual connection. So don't wait for the text. Be the person who doesn't need it. And when it comes, and it will, you'll finally be in a place to ask the only question that really matters. Does this align with the life I'm creating? That's your power. That's your peace. And that's when love becomes a choice, not a chase.